Yeah, I know you wanted to talk about the border thing. I'd like to pull up some stuff about that. How many have come into the country within 9 months? How many have been deported? Uh, I want to pull stuff about what happened during Trump's term and Obama's term as comparison leading up to it. Um, I also wouldn't mind talking about why I didn't go to church this morning.
Okay, we can have that therapy session
Okay.
today.
That's okay. So that was kind of been, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, and
Wait, are you starting on your thing now?
Yeah.
Okay, now you can go ahead. I want there to be a pause. Tell me how you're feeling, Connor.
Okay,
I'm
so
here for you.
man, it honestly goes all the way back to Texas, where I had a pretty rough time of it down there, spiritually, morale wise. I was not doing fantastic. It's I actually could say it probably goes back to even like whatever first churches I can remember going to and leaving and going to and leaving and going to and leaving. Whether it's because I moved or there were theological differences where the leader said, no, you really, it's not helping us to have you here, basically. That's happened at least twice. Maybe 3 times, actually. I think that third one's more administrative wise, but then, I mean, you met me at Grace Covenant. You know my reasons for leaving there, which still love the people there, but it was definitely time for me to move on and go to something else. And essentially, the question I came asking myself, because I spent at best every other week going to church when I was in Texas. Once I got back into the swing of things and trying to go and get involved, and going to Gateway Church. It's a huge church. There's a lot of people, a lot of places to get plugged in. Also, it's also get lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's a ginormous church.
Yeah, it's huge. Now, you can find the right pockets to get into, but I just really didn't have a direction on where I wanted to go.
Well, it's hard to have a community with like thousands upon thousands of people.
It is. And I didn't live in an area that actually had a satellite church near me. So I was driving like 40 minutes away to go there. So it's like anybody that lived, like if I was to go to a group, they all lived 40 minutes away at best, depending on which side of the city they lived on. Went to Mercy Culture, enjoyed that one for the last bit of season that I had in Texas, and then I came back here, and then COVID happened, and then I wasn't able to go to church. Stopped by my parents a few times, and didn't really find myself wanting to go to that one, and have visited a handful of other churches since then. And I ended up finding myself walking into church and realizing that I did not enjoy the aspect of going. And wondering why it's set up the way it is. And this has largely come down to me looking at Western churches and Western church culture and the setup of it. And I don't like any of it. The best experience that I had with church was definitely doing a home church. Having a really small set of friends and community that we would go out and volunteer. We would sit down, listen to a message, discuss the message, eat food, have community every single week. The relationships grew really, really deep, really quickly. And that was some of the most personal time I think I've spent in the Word with other people and feeling fulfilled. And then I get to church, any of the more formal churches with a building, and I really don't like the strict mundane schedule that every church seems to fall under. You walk in, you have worship, you have announcements, you have sermon. Maybe you get more announcements. You have 1 or 2 more songs, you pray and you leave, and that's it. And you fill out a Connect card. I hate those, by the way. I hate the Connect cards. I really hate membership cards. I don't understand those.
I have never heard of a membership card.
You've never heard of membership? Like to a church?
Well, I've had like I am a member of a church, and I agree with membership with churches. What I haven't heard of is a membership card. Like,
Okay.
do I have to hold?
Connect card. No, I didn't mean membership card, like a literal, like,
Oh,
here's your church ID.
I was like, Connor, I have never heard of this in my entire life.
No,
You're gonna have
no,
to
no,
explain.
No. I'm talking like membership to churches. I understand why it's there. It doesn't mean I have to like it, and churches feel more corporate to me. They remind me of being at work. There's a schedule. You come in, you do the schedule, you leave. And beyond that, there's not really much. Yes, they have small groups and other such things. My experience with those is they're usually severely lacking, and there's not a lot of discipleship going on. And to me, churches are just a weekly occurrence of what happens on a lot of the big crusades. I love Billy Graham. Franklin Graham's pretty good, I guess. It's like all of those crusades and any of the other ones that are out there, the biggest thing is that they get like these once a day Christians. And even where you and me are at with salvation, where I believe that somebody can lose their faith or walk away, and then you attest that they just never had it in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of settings perpetuate something like that happening to someone. Whether it's, I'm genuinely accepting Christ today, and then I think they walked away, a couple weeks later because there's no discipleship that happens afterwards, or whether they just never really got to encounter Christ in your perspective. Either way, it creates a false sense of Christianity. And I've been mulling it over in my head, and I'm not opposed to the idea of starting a small group church out here in my area with Preston and friends, and trying to get even other friends that I have that aren't saved to come to it, but by organizing almost type of church activities, but it will look like our group of friends. And that's how I've seen it happen before with a home church, with getting people into it, where it's like they spent time with us outside of church settings all the time, would never, ever, ever walk into a church except for Christmas. Mm-hmm. Started home church, and the guy's family kept coming to the home church, and eventually he's like, well, I think I feel a bit more comfortable in that setting. I know all of these people. I'll come. And he came, and 6 weeks later he was saved, and he's been saved ever since. And his wife had accepted Christ years before and had been faithful to him, although he rejected Christ for the longest time. Yeah. I've got friends that are similar that don't want to talk about religion and do any of this stuff, and it's like, they're not coming if I invite them to church. It is not their thing. I can't get them to talk about it for 5 minutes. They stay away from it. Get them in an environment that's more comfortable and bringing them into it. I guess the issue that I find myself running at is, how do I prevent, because all I've ever known is Western churches, which I don't believe have much of a biblical model based on scripture. They're more corporate. It's more corporatized, I would say. Churches are largely run like businesses. Okay. They've lost the personal aspect to them. That's something I would like to try and get. I don't know how to do it. And like any other startup home church, they always turn into a bigger church with a building and weekly services. And it's not something I want to do. I don't know how to network that out, though. Yeah. I don't know how to put a cap on it and be like, okay, this is too big. This group's too big. It's time to split off. I mean, I guess one way would be to, specifically have people that have been discipled in that group. And it's like, all right, it's time for you guys to plant up another group of your own closer to your area. And part of this idea is probably born out of the idea that at some point, I believe in America, we're not going to be able to gather on Sundays.
I mean, it very well could happen. I don't know when that will be.
No, I don't know if it'll be in our lifetime. It certainly feels like the rapid decline of things could potentially be there quicker than we thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know. I don't even try to guess anymore. I don't try to guess. People try to guess. I don't guess. Because it's not worth it. Did
I tell you about the guy at Walmart?
Oh, you were telling me about that guy.
That I got frustrated with.
That he was like preaching about the end times or something?
Preaching about the end times and is talking about Revelation. Like in the beginning, like I was totally on board with him. Like, yeah, like absolutely. I do think we need to study the word more. And we do need to be aware of Revelations and the signs of the end times. I'm totally on board with that. And then he went on this long tangent
Oh my
where
gosh.
he's just like, okay, now in this scripture here, it says this, and it talks about this fig tree, and it brings forth this. And it's like, if we can figure out what the fig tree means, we can figure out when Jesus is coming. And I was like,
It's like, wait, hey,
No,
I was
you
like,
can't.
hang on. I agreed with the premise, not with the conclusion.
it's like, no, you can't figure out when Jesus is coming. And the scripture says he will come like a thief in the night, and everybody's going to be caught unaware. And he's just like, no, but if we can figure out the fig tree, then we can know. I'm like, why do you want to know that?
Right.
Just spread the gospel.
Right.
He could come back tonight, dude.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
And he just wanted to waste his time trying to pinpoint the coordinates for when Jesus was going to come back. And I was
Yeah.
like, good luck with that.
Yeah, that's not really worth anyone's time. Like, yeah, it's just not worth their time. And if that guy predicts one day, like, we definitely know that's not when Christ is coming, and we're just gonna call it to be like, great, at least I can make plans that day and know that they're not gonna get interrupted by Christ's coming. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I hear where you're coming from. Like, and I genuinely relate to some of the things that you're talking about, like in regards to the Western church. And the thing is, I have a hard time talking about the Western church as if I have like a good comparison of what, you know, it looks like in other places of the world. To be genuinely honest, like I don't know what that looks like. But I do relate to this almost mechanical nature to church, this very kind of structured out thing that we walk in, we walk out, we do small groups. It's like these pieces of church that are not as intertwined as we would like them to be. It's not like a flowing process, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't feel natural, if that is a good way of putting it sometimes.
I think that is a good way to put it. And I've been trying to figure out why walking back into church all of a sudden this summer felt so weird to me. And I think it's because of a lapse of time that I've been a part of a church, like ingrained in a church, which is something that I have been for as long as I can remember. It's been my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I have about a 2-year hiatus from church, like going to a church, being part of a community. And I walk in, I'm like, this is probably the most authentic experience that I could get to bringing a new believer to church. Because I walked back in and I was like, oh yeah, they say that. Wow, that sounds so weird. And then even some of the things that they would do during worship or during prayer, and it sounds a bit like a chant. And I'm like, this. It's like I know some of these people, and I don't doubt their authenticity. But to be honest, at some point, some of it doesn't look much different than other chanting religions out there. And
I mean, I'm sure there's probably some truth to like the way that it looks, but the question is, you know, what is it rooted in? Because it's going to be very difficult to make a good case for whether or not the people in those churches are believers or not. That is such a, you know, I mean,
that's not the case. I'm not
to
trying to
judge.
question like or judge whether they're authentic or not. I'm saying in spite of them being authentic, it just sounds culty. Like it sounds cultish.
I mean, I think sometimes it depends on the denomination that you're talking about, because
Mm-hmm.
I agree and disagree. Because I think I've been to some churches where, and I will refrain from naming names because I really don't have a desire to burn these churches in any way. But I did go to one church that was described by many people as a cult, which is a conversation for a later day.
I don't mind naming them because they exist, and
They
some of
do.
them, because I can probably guess what one of the churches is.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to, you know, contact me about it personally, I have no issue telling them. But on a podcast, I'll probably just refrain for now.
Well, see, that's kind of funny because there's actually a segment that I wanted to do on it because I've been going through the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast released by Christianity Today, which has to do with Mark Driscoll's church with Mars Hill out in Seattle, Washington. And then you've been researching Ravi Zacharias and what happened with that.
Yeah, really bad case.
It's the Mars Hill podcast at least has touched on quite a bit of. I mean, it's really being focused on mega churches because that's what Mark Driscoll's church was, and a lot of these mega churches weren't possible until the internet and technology came around, and air conditioning and stuff is really
Air conditioning.
I mean,
No amount of body heat will keep us from the love of Christ. Make a giant mega church.
It's true in China. It's not their underground church. They're not stopping no matter what. And then over here, we can't be bothered to be in such an enclosure.
Yeah, it's there. Like, I agree with you. Like, there are, and then this is something that I want to be really careful about, because I think that you and I could go on like for hours about what's wrong with churches, and I honestly think we'd probably end up agreeing on most of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would disagree with you a little bit that the Western church structure is like completely unbiblical. Like, obviously we have a pastor, which is elders, and then we have deacons. Like, I do think that the structure there is good, but it can definitely feel corporate for the reasons that I mentioned before, with it just kind of feeling like the parts aren't, it almost feels forced to a certain extent. But a lot of people, they spend a lot of time criticizing the church, and I think there's things that are worthy of criticism. But part of me wonders too if how much of it is a church problem or how much of it is a like individual believer problem. Like, for example, all right, so we talk about, how these parts feel kind of forced, right? We're like, oh, small groups, oh, we go to a small group, wow, small group, not big group. When they say on the pulpit, like, the big gathering is good, but we need to have small like, oh wow, that was really deep and significant. But for a lot of people, it's just about schedule. Like, America is so busy moving forward that everything's just a part of our schedule, and we don't really see church the way that we should be seeing it, as something to build community. We're too busy with our jobs, too busy with work, too busy with our marriage, our children, your son's soccer game, just name something. And it's full of activities where we feel like church is something that we have to fit in, where it should be something that is overall intertwined into our lives. And I think that is I think at least, and I'm sure I could be wrong, but from what I've gathered, I think that's what makes church feel so dysfunctional, is because you're trying to force people, like, because I see our leadership really trying to make those strides towards small group. Like, I think their efforts are genuine, and I think some of it's on them, but some of it's on the believers in those churches that aren't willing to say, yeah, I really do want to pursue community. Maybe I am a mom with 4 kids, but I do want to have people in my house, and they're going to help me clean and they're going to help me with my kids. But we've lost that community aspect. And I think some of that too, with American culture, at least, is this idea of independence. And I'm all about freedom, I'm all about independence. Yep. But we're an individualistic culture, not a collectivistic culture. Right. So it's about like what we can do on our own and what we can achieve on our own. And that doesn't necessarily foster this idea of community. Because think about it too, like, we can all make as much money as we want, like, besides anywhere else in the world. Like, we can make a lot of strides in that area. So why do I need as much financial help? And if I ask for financial help, I'm weak. These are issues that very subtly in the culture can leak its way into the church. Right. And so I think, to circle back, not quite as Jen Psaki does, my circling back is a little better, I think.
A little bit more instantaneous.
A little bit more. I feel like I make a bit more sense. I don't know. Maybe that's
Psaki
just me.
Or Psaki?
Psaki.
Is it
Jen
Psaki?
Psaki. Yep, Jen Psaki.
All right.
Yeah. That's unless I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but that's how I've heard it pronounced consistently across the board. Okay. But anyway, to circle back to the main point, I do think that the structure is correct, but I think that what's filling that structure is not what we would have hoped for, and that it takes a little bit of work on the believers' parts to not just depend on the church to foster their community
and their faith.
Yes. And I think plenty of churches have preached this, where they're like, you can't just come on Sunday and hope that does the trick, right? And you know that. I know you know that.
I know it. And most people know that, and then just them doing it is
Yeah. And I've fallen victim to being like, why won't the church do this? And I mean, that's actually a deeper conversation, because I think there are some areas where, again, I think the church has legitimately done a bad job. But there are some areas where I'm like, I think I've done a really bad job. I've gotten lazy and have not put in the effort into building community with other people, because I get, I get so busy. But I sympathize like with your reasons, and I somewhat agree with them to an extent. I'm not actually against home churches either.
I think so. You were talking about, it's more individualistic, and I've got my schedule, so I'm gonna get to church at 10:30. I'm gonna leave at 12 when it's done.
Yeah. Nope, I'm by the way, guilty of that. That's how I'm here today.
I
I literally left church. I was like, I have to go right now, and I have to go meet my friend. So guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Yeah, but then the structure of the church is largely built so that people can do that. It enables you to do it. Something that was interesting about home church is that there wasn't really an end time. So sometimes families would come, we would have church, discussion, food, and then sometimes they leave right after food. Sometimes they stay all day. We end up watching a movie or starting a bonfire outside. And it's just like, there was more time to continuously bring up what we were learning in church that day and to spend that time together. It was more free form. Yeah. It was a free schedule, and I mean,
well, you know what the Baptists do well, right?
No, I don't know what the Baptists do.
Potlucks. They do great potlucks. That is what Baptists do. They do potlucks, and that reminds me of my old church, the one I grew up in, where there was problems with that church. It turns out there's problems with every church, but
yeah, if you think that you get to a church and you're like, oh, wow, there's really not any problems here, you haven't stayed long enough.
Yeah, or it's a cult and you don't know it yet. But anyway, we went to this church when I was younger in Michigan, and one of the things we did, and I think this made it feel like community, is like after we were done with church, we did the pews, we had hymn books, and all that good stuff. But right afterwards, we would go up to a room up in the church, everyone else would leave, and we had brought our, crock pot food and had our potluck, and then the kids, the adults, everyone in between sat down and talked about the sermon together.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. I think there's actually a middle ground between what I'm saying, what you're saying, of I think there should be corporate gatherings because we do need to be under solid teaching. And I think it's 1 Timothy that talks about those really strict qualifications for teachers. Of course, we could get into like Ravi Zacharias and Mark Driscoll and when that strict teaching isn't quite followed. But it's having that corporate gathering, because we need to identify with a group of believers, but that's also that almost organic coming together afterwards and wanting to talk about the message, and having and for our potluck it was like 3 families, but we were big families. Yeah. We'd all just get together and do that as a family, no kids Sunday school.
No felt boards?
Okay, we did have felt boards in Sunday school.
Oh no, the felt boards.
I love felt boards. I still wish we had felt boards, to be honest, because I actually really loved. That's what I remember from Sunday school, is those felt boards, and actually some other stuff too. But all that to say that I think there is kind of a middle ground between the two, and I think you're searching for something that's authentic.
Something more authentic than what I've been through for a lot of my life, because I'm probably pushing a dozen churches, and I'm only 28, so it's about every 2 years.
You're 28? Oh, I thought you were younger.
Oh wait, I might be 29. I don't remember.
No, wait, hang on.
I'm 93.
I wasn't expecting that.
I'm a 93 baby.
I kissed the mic. If anyone heard that, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think. So if you're 20, no, you are 28.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not 29 yet.
Yeah, because I'm 23.
Thank God. I was like, no, don't tell me I'm gonna turn 30 in 6 months.
No. Because you're 5 years older than I am, and I'm 23. So you have to be 28. But yeah, you said you've been to 12 churches. You're 28, so you're pretty young.
And bits and pieces of each one I've been to. Grace Covenant, something I really enjoyed about the young adults there was that we had all these activities that we would do, and that brought people into our group. It presented those opportunities like, hey, we're playing volleyball. Do you want to come hang out with us? And it's like, yeah, okay, well, we're going to have small group on this night and it's Bible study. Do you want to come? And they usually, I don't know about that. They play volleyball or ultimate frisbee or laser tag or whatever we were doing, sitting in hammocks at a park. And then pretty soon they'd show up at that group like sooner or later. And I thought that was great. I definitely wanted to push more into the teachings. And that's for me, for personal growth. I was like, I kind of need to shove off from this one.
Yeah.
But I mean, that like different aspects of different places I've been to got something really right and really great. Startup church, fantastic with getting people involved and volunteering in the church, and then really bad at some other things. And it's like every single one of them, I've had like these glimpses and seasons where being in it just felt amazing. And then at some point, something would snap or something wasn't quite right, and it would all just fall apart. And I mean, probably around 100 people at this point from different small groups I've been to, and I don't talk to hardly any of them. And I've tried to go back and reconcile with the friends that I was closer with, and unfortunately, it was not very well received by any of them, except for one. So I would like to try and create more of those authentic moments that I think I've lived through in different groups.
Yeah, and there's going to probably be some down period where, as you and I have both admitted, no church is perfect, and you and I both know walking with Christ isn't always a fun, good time, especially, with a church full of broken people. But I understand where you're coming from, but obviously I am, challenging you because that's what I'm here for.
That's fair.
Yeah. But your desire is well understood, and even in the church that I'm in, I have some real genuine struggles with it, where there's some things about it that I really like. There's things about it that I think they're getting wrong. Are they salvation issues? No. If they're like, yeah, Jesus would die for the animals, and be like, no. The answer is no. I think this is heretical. I'm going to leave now. But I think you were talking about, from what I can tell, you just want some level of balance of community, but it has to be fellowship with other believers and strong teaching.
And I think the ability to question teachings is a big one. That's what I really liked about home church, is it was like, okay, we can sit there and listen to the sermon. And honestly, the most questions at the time came from the guy that was the unbeliever. And then he would be like, why did he say this? I was like, oh, okay, well, we can look into that. But then eventually you start getting to it just, and the reason that some of us had come together was because theologically we had differed with the church, and the church was like, well, we can't really have you in leadership or serving. And it just, our path, what they wanted to take, was very different than what we thought was biblically correct. Well, they really wanted to be the next Bethel. They wanted to be the Bethel of the East Coast. Super spiritual.
Okay.
Anybody that they got as an authority figure to look up to, or that they would be like, this book is great, or this teaching, and this pastor, and this sermon, and this church, and they've got this great thing in this program. We're going to do something like it, and we're going to really mirror them. They even sent out one of the pastors to go live in California and attend Bethel to basically be, who was it? Who was sent out into the promised land? Joshua. He was going.
Joshua and Caleb?
He was going out to scope out what they were doing at this church so that he could come back and help them try and recreate it.
Well, yeah.
I don't think he ever moved back, by the way. I think he's still out in California.
Then.
I don't think he goes to Bethel anymore. But that was essentially their entire goal. And we were like, we fundamentally just disagree with a lot of the things that are there. And my parents essentially told leadership, they're like, we can't go along with this, and you want our kids to be in leadership and to start doing some of these things, and we're not doing that. Like, don't go teaching that. You don't have enough evidence scripturally to back up some of the things you guys are wanting to do or trying to do. And this is a church, and I loved the church. They brought a lot of great things into my life, but they are the church that if it's a study the Bible or prayer gathering, you're lucky to get a dozen to 24 people. You got somebody coming in from out of town that's going to give prophetic words. You filled the entire church. You filled the overflow section. You filled anything outside the overflow section so that you just stuck speakers in the parking lot so that people could listen. And that was for multiple services within one weekend.
Yeah, there's just an imbalance of priorities and what's
it's also
actually
easy.
important.
It's really easy to come and then hopefully get picked out of a crowd and be like, I'm going to give you a word. It's difficult to sit there and pray and think about things.
And read scripture.
And read scripture and study
let God
it.
speak to you that way. Because that's how God speaks to people sometimes is, through scripture. Anyway.
It doesn't always have to be a prophetic word. Funny enough, the guy came years apart, and I ended up going to one service, never intending to get called up, and not going for that, but going for the experience of it. And the first time, I don't know if it was my parents that had gotten like part of the front row saved, or if it was just because it was also something that the young adults at this church did. Like we just pushed for the front row all the time. It's like, we're going to be first. Front row for service. It's all young adults.
Front row or nothing.
Yeah. Nobody else is. It was like, we would take it for first, second, third service. No older people up there. No middle-aged people. The only part was the reserve section for the pastor and his wife. That's the only section that got somebody that wasn't a young adult.
Yeah.
But the guy just felt led to give prophetic words to everybody in the front row and nobody else for that particular service. So I got prophetic word then. And then he came back like 4 years later or more. I don't look anything like I did then. There's no way he remembers what my face looks like. And he gives verbatim almost the exact same prophetic word to me, who he picked out of the middle of the crowd.
That's pretty crazy.
And then some of it did come true. So
some of it. Hopefully all of it comes true.
No, it was the bad part of it that came true.
That's another conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Because we could go into prophetic word as well.
But no, that was leaving churches because of some theological differences that I consider gray areas has given me a particular heart for people that it's like, okay, theologically we disagree on stuff. You and me fundamentally disagree on a few things, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter to me. At the core of it is that God created everything and man fell to sin and we're only redeemed through Christ, and that's it. Everything else is a bit gray to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things I think I would add to what you're saying is that there are things in scripture that have a very black and white nature.
Yes.
But there are some things like, I would say like secondary theological differences, like, Calvinism,
Calvinism and Arminianism, complementarian versus, what's the other one?
I'm trying to remember myself.
I'm surprised I remembered complementarian. That's usually the one I forget,
Because you're the other one. Because I'm complementarian.
No, I would actually be considered complementarian.
Oh, I thought you leaned more the other way.
I do.
Oh,
but
okay.
Because I don't support it 100%, it takes me out of that category.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Oh my gosh, what is the other one?
No, I'm blanking too because I know what it is. Like, I know what it is, but I can't. Now you're making me blank.
I can't take this.
I can't take the pressure. Can't take
egalitarian. I'm
yes,
like, I know
yes,
it starts with an E.
Yes. I know now. Yep.
So because I'm egalitarian for like all parts of the church except for that lead part, it makes me complementarian.
Interesting.
I don't quite understand it, but from at least 4 or 5 scholars on the subject, when I read through like a counterpoints book, basically, where they went back and forth.
I remember that you were.
They were the ones that specifically were going on about how one of them that was listed as complementarian, he's like, I'm actually egalitarian. It's like, it's just this one position, and I'm like, I think this head role should model like the family model, and the men should be in charge of it. But as far as everybody else, the elders and the leaders that keep that person accountable should be men and women. And because he held that position just for the lead pastor, He was like, I'm complementarian, even though he's like, I'm basically egalitarian.
That's so interesting. We should like read a book sometime and go through it and,
Yeah,
and
no.
talk about it.
I've got that book somewhere. That one was really
Yeah,
interesting.
That'd be interesting.
I liked half of the authors that were in it, and the other two were really irritating to me.
Speaking of irritating, how about that border situation?
We can move over to the border.
Did you like my segue there?
It was a really good segue.
Wasn't too bad. So to catch up, in case you didn't know, for the people listening, we have a border situation. Though it seems as if Kamala, I hope I said that right.
Yeah,
Kamala Harris, and President Joe Biden, they have rescinded. Tell me if I'm correct on this, Connor. They rescinded a lot of Trump's policies. And now we have an overflow.
Yeah, I know they at least got rid of the stay in Mexico policy.
Yes, that's the big one. That's the big
gone.
one. And we had some images come out probably about a week ago at this point of...
I guess I don't pay attention to social media that much because I only saw them like 2 days ago.
I think I saw them a week ago, but I was so confused because I saw them and it was a Border Patrol agent on a horse with long reins, or it looked like a whip, and people were claiming that these Border Patrol agents were whipping Haitian migrants. And this was very confusing for me because I had no context for it. I just hopped onto social media. There it was, and I really didn't know what they were. And before I know it, everyone's like, "Oh wow, they're whipping Haitian migrants." And now, as a logical human being, I say, "Okay, this doesn't sound right." Like,
it doesn't help you catch them either.
No, like, because they're trying to, and if you actually look at the images from the front and from the back, they're not whipping them, they're grabbing them because they're trying to stop them from, crossing the border.
Yep.
So whipping them isn't really going to help a ton.
No, I would be more inclined to see a lasso going out and catching people.
The lasso, actually, I could maybe see a lasso.
I can see that.
Maybe. But everyone was claiming that this was just horrible treatment, and there's, I guess, racism as well. Everything's racist at this point, so I'm not surprised by the argument.
We've diluted the term for racist now. It's just about anything at this point, from said microaggressions to full-blown superiority complex because of my skin color.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, we talking racist level 1, like beginner? We talking?
Oh my gosh,
we're level 3. Like, I need more context for this.
Yeah, no, you're right. Racism has gotten so watered down that it's hard to take really anyone seriously anymore when it comes to racism, which is honestly just a real shame because real racism exists. And by calling everything racist, you have really diminished true racist acts. And that really, really ticks me off because there is true racism out there. But if you call everything that you don't like racist without even knowing the facts, and here's the thing about this whole Border Patrol situation with the whips. People, they just immediately posted about it. They didn't look into it any further.
Nope.
They didn't see what was going on. Because I'm going to be honest, all right? I actually saw an explanation about what these reins were, because I am a Yankee. Like, I do not know diddly squat about horses. I didn't know those were split reins when I saw them, okay?
Yeah, no, I didn't either. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I do know from watching Western movies and my aunt having horses and stuff like that, I did know that there are connected reins and there are other reins that are not. And that is split reins purely for the reason that they can't be caught on something as easily.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't
So yeah, if you're riding through brush and stuff, like on the border, Texas scrub brush is awful. It's not like the forests up that we have over here on the East Coast. Texas scrub brush is, it's dry. There's usually thorns involved. They're very wiry, like brushes. Like brush, I probably is the best way to put it. And
yeah.
I can't think of any territory. I mean, you've been out to Texas with me. If you kind of remember the dinosaur park,
I do.
Those types of scrub trees and brush, when a park is not cleared out, it is thick with that. So you were riding through that. And what can happen is you basically getting a branch caught on the reins. And when the branch gets caught on the reins for a horse and it pulls back on them, it's pulling on the bit in their mouth, which if you're running at full speed, that's going to hurt. So it's really to prevent injury to the horse and then secondarily to the rider, because the horse is going to react to the bit being yanked in its mouth. They're going to go up on 2 feet, throw the rider, maybe land on them. So it's safer for everybody that they not do that.
Mm-hmm.
On top of it, it could also be getting caught on, well, we'll say the people that are crossing the border, the illegal immigrants that are running from the law once they get over here.
Right. And see, I didn't even know that. I learned something new just now. And back to a little bit what I was saying, which kind of goes into what you're talking about, is, you know, this person his explanation was good, but he basically like called people idiots for not knowing that they were split reins. And I was like, you know, I'm not an idiot for not knowing they're split reins. Like, I just don't know. I just don't know that these aren't split reins. So for anyone who thought that they were whips, I'm not actually upset at them. Where it's like, if you don't know,
they kind of look like it.
I can see why.
Yeah.
I can totally see why they would think that. But once you receive correction about it, and then you still choose to keep going with that narrative, even though it's blatantly false, that's when I start to have an issue. Like, you have to be okay with accepting correction. Like, hey, like, these are split reins. That makes, and I looked them up. I Googled them. I was like, oh yeah, these are split reins.
Yep.
This makes sense. And with your explanation about why you would maybe want split reins in Texas terrain also makes a ton of sense as well. But no one, again, and this goes into a broader conversation of if your entire worldview is seen through the eyes of race, you are going to find a racist explanation for literally just about anything. And I feel like that's kind of the case with this, is that even when there was pretty blatant correction, I even think Biden's DHS, I don't know how to say his last name, but it sounds like malarkey. It's not malarkey, but it kind of sounds like that with the way that it's spelled.
What's the position again?
DHS.
Let's find that.
Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas? Is that how you say it?
That's how I would pronounce it, Mayorkas.
Yeah. He did say in a press briefing that it was split reins, as far as I can see, and from what was reported. He kind of went back on it a few times, but they were indeed split reins.
Which I believe they've removed all the horses from the border at this point.
Yes, they are punishing Border Patrol agents for doing their job. That is correct. So, the moral of the story is, do a little bit of research before you look foolish, because I think you just genuinely look foolish if you post something like, oh my gosh, they're whipping them.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, well, if you've ridden a horse a day in your life, or if you just did a quick Google search, you would have found out that these were split reins. If you also looked at more images that came out, you would see that the Border Patrol agent was grabbing the hem of his shirt as opposed to whipping them. So,
and it also goes forward with people that, like the person that you read about that identified that it was split reins and then called everybody idiots. Not everybody grows up with horses.
Right.
In what they see in the movies, that they're not going to know the difference.
Right.
They have no idea. And there's probably more styles than just the regular looped reins and split reins. There's probably more, and they probably have different purposes. I don't know what they are.
Nope, I don't know what they are either.
The majority of Americans don't know what they are. Right.
I think that's kind of the point of the podcast that we're trying to start. Is like, obviously you and I have specific political views. Ours seem to line up quite a bit. We do tend to lean more conservative. We are Christian, even if we have varying degrees within our Christianity and varying degrees of differences in conservatism. But we genuinely want to call out what's bad and call out what's good, and really take the time to actually research what we're talking about. Which today, obviously, we're just having a casual
this is a bit more
conversation
off the cuff as we test all of our audio systems and
Right.
get used to talking in microphones. I've gotten pretty used to it, but that's because I play video games.
I mean, I
Quite
feel
a
pretty
bit.
comfortable.
You seem pretty comfortable.
I am very
It's not catching
comfortable.
you off guard.
No, I love talking. I love talking. Talking is wonderful.
And it's funny how our voices sound almost more authentic in the headphones than they do in real life.
They
Like
kind of do.
it's going to be really weird taking them off and then hearing your voice. I'm like, just doesn't sound as clear anymore.
I just like myself in this situation better. But what Connor and I plan on doing throughout our podcast is to actually look at different issues and to look at them from both sides. Not to misquote the other side, but actually look at what they're putting out. I think critical race theory is a great example of actually looking into who made critical race theory and what do they say about it.
What's her name? Robin DiAngelo? Well,
Yes, I actually do plan on
I don't
reading.
know that she made it. I
She
did want to
did
get her
not.
book and
No.
read it. She's gotten very popular, though. Her and
It's-
I cannot remember that other guy's name at the moment, but they're the two biggest, most prolific speakers in the country.
Yeah,
right
they're
now.
pretty. There's Abram X. Kendi, Robin
that one.
DiAngelo, but they didn't make it. It started off in, I think, academia with Derek Bell. It's a little, again, very complicated. Get into it later.
Surface level, the intentions of it sound pretty good.
It does, but when you actually like hear some of the statements like that they've written and made about it, like they're pretty clear about like what their goal is. And I don't think even people who oppose critical race theory don't understand the roots of it and don't understand why it's so problematic.
Yeah. The surface level explanation for it, I don't really have much of an issue with, which is let's look at, all the different aspects that racism has affected people within a nation, a culture.
But that's my point, is that that's not what critical race theory is about.
Right. That is the surface explanation that everybody gets, which sounds great, but then that's not what they're actually teaching. And that's an entire segment or more on its own.
And you and I want to genuinely go through it because we don't know all the roots of it either. We want to go through it and learn more about it and then come back with an honest, truthful conclusion based on Christian values and what scripture has to say. Same thing with abortion. How does abortion actually happen? Is it moral? Let's actually take a look at the mechanics and the things that people don't want to talk about and then come up with a conclusion that's moral and then scripturally sound. We don't want to be too feely, gushy, but we're not going to call people idiots. We just want to find the truth and we want you to do it with us. I think that pretty much sums up how I feel.
No, that's definitely where I'm at with it, is being able to have honest conversations about topics that are extremely difficult, sensitive, or even obscure in today's political, cultural landscape. Honestly, the social media landscape, because everything's a hot trend for a hot second and then it's gone.
Right.
And I mean, take, for instance, the Afghanistan crisis that we had not even 3 weeks ago, and you don't hear anything about it anymore.
Yeah, and I'm very passionate about that crisis, but part of me is like, am I going to be super annoying on social media, or am I actually going to help with it behind the scenes and do what I can, which it's going to take a lot more work, but already found like an organization that I really like, that I've been supporting. But I want to do more than just complain on social media about it.
Yeah, no, it would be nice to be able to get involved in different ways. With just, I mean, whatever it is becomes a passion project.
Yeah, I guess you can't be passionate about everything, right? You can't donate to everything.
You cannot be passionate about everything. One of the annoying things about the millennial generation that seems like if there's a cause, they're going to take it up. You have too much free time on your hands. Like, I don't know what else you can do. Like, that is just, I'm going to be a champion. I'm going to be a champion for every single cause that potentially comes up. And I've seen that with some friends. I've seen it with some family. It's like, this is not well for you to be taking on all of this.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, like, if you're missing the key part of, okay, be passionate about these issues in Afghanistan. There's a lot of reasons, and we could do a segment on this too about why Afghanistan hit me much different than any of the crises. Oof, that was a little hard for me there.
Crises.
The crises that have happened over the last couple of years. I don't even know where I was going with that because I made a mistake with the word crisis.
You were talking about how it hits you differently than other things.
Yes, how it hit me differently because of its roots to Christian persecution and just the massive screw up of what happened. But if we're not as believers, if you're a believer listening to the podcast, what are you doing in your community right now to spread the gospel and to help those around you? Like, we should be praying. You can donate money if you want. But if you're just so depressed about trying to help the world, start in your community. Start there.
Start small.
Yeah, start small. And imagine if we all did that, what kind of large effect that would have. So if you lose sight of the gospel, what happens, what I've seen happen at least, is that you kind of come across just bitter all the time. And you kind of lose that root. I've seen that with some believers. Maybe I've even fallen victim to it. I'm sure I have. But it's got to be tied to something. Otherwise, you're just going to go off the cuffs. And it's just going to be tragic for everyone to watch on social media as you flounder, and everyone's like, "What's going on? Are they okay?" They're not.
And the health of your own individual life is going to play a huge aspect of it. If your life is in shambles and pieces, and you can't get things together, then you probably don't need to be going out and focusing on other people's problems and neglecting your own. And to quote or paraphrase Jordan Peterson on it, if you can't clean up your own room, what makes you think that you're going to go clean up the world?
Right.
You're not.
Yeah. And it's not even, and I know you're not making a point of self-love in the terms that culture talks about it.
No.
But you are making a point of, if you can't take care of yourself and work on the issues that you have, then you really are going to have a difficult time championing for everybody else.
You will have an extremely difficult time if you're not together and, put together, prepped, ready, have the energy to handle it, have the mindset to handle it.
And the thing, too, also, it goes back to our first conversation about church, is that if you are going through a hard time, which most people are, and that's okay, is that you want to have that church community. Are you cultivating good community? Do you have close friends that are going to help pick you up? Because you can't do it all on your own. Sometimes you need to clean
support.
your room, but sometimes maybe someone needs to help to help you get started and see what
it's
you need.
It's always easier cleaning somebody else's room, actually.
There's something satisfying about cleaning someone else's room.
Yeah.
I don't know. I usually clean my own room, to be fair. Literally, figuratively, and if the room is my brain, people do have to help me sometimes.
That's fair.
But I think that just about that covers it for today.
Yeah, I think it's a good note to end on.
I think so too. I think this is good. If we keep going, then we're gonna ruin the moment.
Yeah. We could ruin it. But
all right.
We'll work on some topics for next time and get some actual materials lined up to go through and read about. I don't think a book will happen too quick, but
I'm thinking, we'll post about it. We'll make a post.
We'll post about it.
Yeah. This is Jordan and Connor. Can I say your name, Connor?
Yeah, you can say it. I'm not worried about that.
Okay. Well, this is Connor and Jordan with Resident Skeptics. We'll be back